morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Thank you so much for your many comments on last week's program with the amazing Dr. Robert Miller. And guess what? This veterinarian, horse behaviorist, cowboy, and cartoonist is back this week, and he'll talk about many things, including being Rex Allen's vet and about some of the amazing animals he's looked after.
She said, "Do you treat aardvarks?" I said, "I never have, but we'd be willing to." I said, "You have an aardvark?" "No," she said, "but we're thinking of buying one. We want to be sure we can find a veterinarian."
And cowboy mentality sometimes gets us out of trouble, and sometimes it can get us into trouble, especially when ropes and cattle are concerned, and you'll get a kick out of Baxter Black's story this week.
That should work, he thought, not remembering the hundreds of times he had misjudged a cow.
On the Rangeland News, more helpful information about budgeting for the rest of the year.
So we can expect 2021 prices to be higher than the average of last year, but the rate of increase will slow down.
And the highly respected working cowboy, Terry Milliken, wrote a poem that kind of fits for this time of year, and we'll feature it in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight. And on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, how being too assertive with a horse can create more resistance than you want. Dr. Bob Miller talks about one of the most respected movie cowboys of all time right after something that you get to hear just about this time of year every year from Jim Reeder.
Time, and I'm 2 weeks behind on a matrimonial payment plan evidently I had signed. My wife said next year she's gonna take care of being crews. She claims she never sees me when all my calves are due. And I said, whoa, whoa, honey, cut me a little slack. Well, I'm a ranching man, and this you knew when you smiled and said I do. And she said, whoa, whoa, honey, let's get something straight. If I was a four-legged critter, I'd be someone with whom you would relate. I've got two calves in the barn tonight, and they're looking kind of down. So I figured maybe best if I just stayed and hung around. My dinner, it was hot at 6 by 11, freezing cold. Oh, but nothing quite compared to the iceberg at the door. She said, whoa, whoa, honey, cut me a little slack. Well, I'm a lonesome girl in a lonesome world, and I want my husband back. And I said, whoa, whoa, honey, I'll make it up to you. When cabin time is over, I'll name the best one of the bunch after you. And I said, whoa, whoa, honey, cut me a little slack. Well, I'm a ranching man, and this you knew when you smiled and said I do. And she said, whoa, now hold on, honey, let's get something straight. If I was a four-legged critter, I'd be someone with whom you would relate. Yeah, if I was a four-legged critter, I'd be someone with whom you would relate.
I think we actually did have a cow named Billy at one time, and she was pretty, had a great voice, and loved to travel. When I got to visit with Dr. Bob Miller, I knew that he was pretty familiar with one of my boyhood heroes.
Later in my
life and when I got this radio show going, I finally got to get to know one of my boyhood heroes, and that, of course, was Rex Allen, the last of the silver screen cowboys. When I was about 12 years old, he was a contract act at our local rodeo up in Edmonton. I sat there in the stands, intermission came up, and the lights went out in the arena, except for one purple spotlight, and here comes Rex and KoKo just making that fast circle around the outside of the arena. KoKo slid to a stop, and Rex vaulted off, and somebody handed him his guitar, and he started to sing Texas Plains. And, oh, man, 12-year-old's heart was just going. And of course, he put KoKo through all these tricks and rode around the outside and shook hands with every youngster and everything, and then it was his son, Rex Jr., that introduced me to him when I was on the board of the Western Music Association back in the early 90s, I guess, and got to hear some great stories. But I understand that he was one of your clients, or you were his vet, or did you work on some of his animals?
Yeah, KoKo was one of my patients.
Wow.
And Rex didn't live very far from where I lived, so we did his veterinary work regularly on his home ranch, and he was a good hand. To me, he was of all the Western movie stars, he was the best singer. He had a wonderful voice. His voice was so good that if he'd had training for opera or something like that, I think he'd have qualified. He had this really wonderful voice. Even his speaking voice, and he did he did a movie for Disney in which he narrated. It was about Cow Dog, I think it was Cow Dog. Mm-hmm. And because of his voice, that wonderful voice of his, I can still hear it. And I remember coming in one evening, 5 or 6 p.m., from my day's calls, and I got out of the pickup truck, and the receptionist came out, and she said, "We got an emergency for you. Rex Allen's on the phone."
And you'll hear what the emergency was, and Dr. Miller do his best Rex Allen impression when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Dr. Robert Miller has known a lot of Hollywood stars, and his office wasn't too far from the ranch of the one and only Rex Allen, who was more of a real hand than a lot of Hollywood cowboy stars. And as Dr. Miller got back to his clinic one day, he found out that he had an emergency to deal with.
I got out of the pickup truck, and the receptionist came out, and she said, "We got an emergency for you. Rex Allen's on the phone." And I got on the phone, and I said, "Rex?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Doc, I've been trying to pull this damn calf all day, and I can't get it done. You better come on out."
So did you come out and pull it?
Oh, yeah.
Was it a tough one, do you remember?
Yes, it was tough, yeah.
You know, isn't that refreshing when we see this world in Hollywood now and stunt men and stand-ins and everything, and here's the cowboy star pulling his own calf or trying to pull his own calf. Now, isn't that something?
Yeah, I had a half dozen of these big-name Western stars that had ranches in my area and were clients. And I'll tell you, and then I cannot say this, we also had non-cowboy movie stars as clients because we were commuting distance from Hollywood. And I can't say this for none, but the cowboy stars were gentlemen. They never let their success go to their head. They were salt of the earth. Buddy Epson, Wild Bill Elliott. For a short while, Roy Rogers was in our area for several years. But all of they were just the most decent people, and never let their said no big fat egos, and I couldn't say that for some of the other so-called celebrities because I never was into following these people, so I had some celebrities as clients. I didn't even know who they were until usually like somebody back at the office, the receptionist would say, "Oh, I understand you went and saw so and so today." I said, "Yeah." I said, "How do you know him?" "Oh, he's a huge rock star." and I'd never heard of him because I don't follow that sort of thing.
I remember Rex saying one time, I can't remember who it was to, talking about his wonderful voice, and he said, "Well, this voice is a gift from God, and I'm going to sell it any way I can." And I'd say he did very, very well with it. Well, I hope you agree now that it's only fitting that I play a song that illustrates the amazing voice of Rex Allen. Never played this one on the show before, and the sound quality is far from the day's standards, but listen to Rex's amazing range here.
I left my hometown one warm summer evening, went down to the station to catch me a train, rode west through Missouri and into Wyoming, headed out to California to stake a gold claim. I met her at Clancy's, the cause of my trouble, a woman with beauty for all men to see. She fed me rye whiskey and gave me a 6-gun, said the fools do the digging, smart men work for me. There's gold in the mountain, gold in the valleys, gold in the river, and gold in the sea. Fortunes are waiting for men to claim them, but only the hangman is waiting for me. She gave me her favor, I gave her my 6-gun. We cheated most all of the miners in town, and those who complained that she dealt from the bottom were challenged to draw and were quickly shot down. I'm so tired of killing for love of this woman. The notches on my gun are 20 and 3. The next one I kill will be my scarlet lover. That's why the hangman is waiting for me. There's gold in the mountain, gold in the valleys, gold in the river, and gold in the sea. Fortunes are waiting for men to claim them, but only the hangman is waiting for
Rex Allen, of course, and Dr. Miller was not only his vet, but one of his fans. Ah, great song, wasn't it?
I hadn't heard that one before.
I did. We have a national TV show up in Canada that's very popular called Heartland. And it's kind of a return to, it's about a ranching family on the eastern slopes of the Rockies, and they run a horse rescue operation that's very well written and very well acted. And in our small market, it's dominating Sunday night at 7 o'clock from coast to coast. And I was fortunate enough to have a little part in, a fairly good-sized part, I guess, in one episode, which coincidentally was about a trainer's challenge that they did up there. But I remember talking with the stunt coordinator and the producer and the directors after it was over. And I knew the wranglers and I knew the stunt coordinator and everything, and they said, you know, it's a lot easier to make actors out of real cowboys than it is to make cowboys out of actors.
Well, that's for sure. There's so many back in when the westerns were so popular, there's so many big name stars that played western roles, and they didn't fit the role. Well, not if you knew the cowboy culture, you know that those people didn't fit it. They may be very talented people. Dean Martin, it didn't, just for example, just didn't fit that cowboy roll.
Yeah. I sure loved that song in, was it Rio Bravo, My Rifle, My Pony and Me, that he sang with Rick Nelson. Oh, that was the best part of the movie, was that song.
I have to admit that I was not a fan of Westerns as a kid. When Saturday matinee, all the kids would go, and it don't always be a Western. I was an avid reader, so I was knowledgeable as a result of all my reading. And so when I'd see a gunfight and they'd fire 30 rounds without reloading, and I'd say, "You can't do that. He's fired 6 shots," and the other kids would say, "Oh, shut up, Miller, you know it all." Or I remember another time when a guy jumps on a horse in St. Louis and lights out at full speed for Sacramento. I said, "That's stupid. You can't run a horse like that." And they'd, "Shut up, Miller."
And when they made those movies, they had no idea we could watch them now and freeze frame them and go into slow motion, and you can see all kinds of things that the director never thought you were going to see.
Yeah, they've been just a very few Westerns that I thought were great.
Well, Dr. Miller talks about a lot of his exotic patients in a little while, and next it's Baxter Black and a story about collateral damage, and oh yeah, a good song written and sung by an Alberta cowboy with a pretty good rodeo background. And then the Rangeland news when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, and I'll be right back after this with a little peek at collateral damage.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you, to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
And for our Canadian listeners, just check Corteva.ca, the Canadian website.
Some cows you can walk right up to, but this particular cow was pretty skittish, so Keeler knew something was wrong when she wouldn't get out of the way of his pickup. He decided a shot of antibiotic would perk her up, so he dug his rope out from behind the seat and tied it around her neck. In the bed of his pickup, laying flat, was a 750/16 8-ply truck tire still on the 8-hole rim. Keeler backed up to the cow, lifted up the 60-pound wheel, and ran the tail of his rope through the axle hole and tied it. That should work, he thought, not remembering the hundreds of times he had misjudged a cow. Well, when he hit her with the needle, the cow jumped. The iron rim scraped against the rusty bed and made a screech that worked as good as a barking dog. The cow sprang to life and took off, dragging the tire behind her. It bounced crazily, resulting in a circuitous trajectory which led her back to the pickup. She crashed into the fender, shot putting the wheel over her head and right through the windshield. 2 weeks later, Keeler was back on duty with a new windshield, and it wasn't so much the cost of it all, insurance had covered it, but was the inconvenience, driving to town, leaving the truck, someone to take him home, then another hitchhike back to town. But today's job was to take an orphan calf to the sale. He got the 2-month-old bull calf roped in the corral, but having learned his lesson 2 weeks earlier, he tied the rope to the bumper of his pickup instead of the tire. Keeler hadn't thought his plan through. After capturing the fighting calf, he had the vague idea that maybe he was going to hog-tie it in the back of his pickup, but he'd forgot any pagan string. So he ran to the shed for some proper twine. In his haste to return, he hit a stack of empty linseed oil cans. It made a racket like someone beating on a tin roof with a log chain. The surprised calf jumped into the bed of the pickup, over the cab, and landed on the hood, which was about as far as the rope would let him go. There he stayed and stomped the hood till it looked like a lumpy mattress. He managed to mangle a side view mirror, smash the bug guard, tear off both wipers, and break through the brand new windshield again. Well, insurance covered it for a second time, but his Arkansas Farm Bureau deductible has gone up. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by Corteva Agriscience.
Welcome to the second annual Integrity Speckle Park Sale. We'll once again be hosting it at Dryland Cattle Trading in Veteran, Alberta on Friday, March 26th. We'll have 30 top-quality yearling Speckle Park bulls and 10 purebred Speckle Park heifers for sale. Moving Spots Cattle, Wolf Lake Speckle Park, and McAleer Ranching are proud to partner on this offering. The sale and cattle videos will be available on DLMS, and if you'd like more information, phone Curtis at 306-228-9402. Join us at Veteran on March 26th. Not much can raise your stress level more than a tractor breakdown when you need it most. We've all spent hours on the phone and driving around trying to find the right parts, and that's no fun when you're missing something you need to finish the job. Here's a better way. Just go to bctractorparts.com. That's where you can find about any part for any make of tractor. If you're restoring a vintage tractor or just keeping up the maintenance on the ones you're using, you can have the parts you need in a short time. And you know what? There's some great pictures of tractor restoration projects and much more right there at bctractorparts.com. What? Oh, you don't have internet? Well, try calling Mark at 250-395-0960. Just ahead of the Rangeland news, here's a good one written by an Alberta cowboy who had a pretty good rodeo career. And he's got a good way with a song. Larry Sands wrote this one called A Cowboy's Golden Years.
He cowboyed up at an age so young and tender. The hard, fast living took his youth away. The bulls and the broncs wore down his body with no thought of how the golden years would be. The rugged mountain trails bring back old memories of his love for nature and the cowboy way. Spruce bough beds, a canvas tarp for cover. Seems his golden years are turning dark and gray. Lord, take the weight off of his shoulder. No longer should he bear the pain. The sleepless nights are getting longer. Take the hurt away and let him live again. Now the wrinkles in his brow show how he's aging, but his tired old eyes still gleam with cowboy pride. A tarnished silver buckle on the table reminds him of when he'd made a winning ride. Then he slowly lay back on his pillow. His never-ending dreams are now in vain. With a hurting smile, he motioned towards that buckle. He whispered, "Lord, you know I'd do it all again." So take the weight off of his shoulder. No longer should he bear the pain. As he makes his final ride up yonder, let this cowboy live his golden years again. Let this old cowboy live his golden years again.
The Rangeland News from the Spirit of the West, a roundup of issues and events from the world of agriculture.
At the top of page 1, it says, working out the budget for fuel, fertilizer, fencing supplies, vet bills, salt, mineral, machinery repairs is tricky at the best of times, and of course, inflation sure plays a part. And that applies even to our grocery bill. Gary Crawford, though, is with an economist who is about to make a bold prediction on how food prices are going to go for the rest of this year.
The USDA has a new forecast for food price inflation this year, and yes, even after 2020's large increases, USDA economist Carolyn Chelius says we can expect 2021 prices to be higher than the average of last year, but the rate of increase will slow down. In 2020, average prices went up about 3.5%. Here's her forecast for this year.
For 2021, we're expecting all food prices to increase between 2 and 3%. We're expecting food away from home or restaurant food prices to increase also between 2 and 3%. And then we're expecting retail food prices or food at home prices to increase between 1 and 2%.
So, Carolyn, you're going out on quite a limb on this, trying to forecast for the whole year.
Exactly. Yes. It's hard to know what will happen, especially with all of the uncertainty.
Especially the uncertainties around the COVID pandemic. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Well, let's say breakfast is ready, and Billy makes pancakes so light and fluffy that you got to put a spoon on them just to keep them from floating up off the plate. And then you try to spread the butter. Well, if it's been in the fridge, it's hard enough to rip up those pancakes. And it seems that some folks say room temperature butter is getting harder. Canada's dairy farmers and the dairy industry are vowing to find out what's going on with the hard butter issue. And a working group has been created to look at the question of whether butter has gotten harder in recent years and if some feed supplements are part of the cause. For weeks, foodies across the country have been debating whether butter has suddenly seemed to stay hard at room temperature rather than becoming soft and easy to spread on bread or mix into baking. Well, there's little solid research on the subject. The hardness of butter in recent years, the specific impact of various feed additives on milk fat composition and characteristics, and producer incorporation of various substances has not been studied much in terms of how they affect hardness. Well, if you have a big semi and you live in Alberta, March was the deadline to complete testing for Class 1 mandatory entry-level driver training under the Alberta Transportation Farmer and Farm Worker Extension Program. During the pandemic, Team Alberta, that consists of Alberta Barley, Alberta Canola, Alberta Pulse Growers, and the Alberta Wheat Commission, along with other producer groups, have been working with Alberta Transportation to reduce lengthy training waiting times, testing limitations, and equipment and language barriers. The concerns are being heard, and they indicate a lack of sufficient training and testing capacity. So if you need to complete your road test for your Class 1, they say you should contact Alberta Transportation to book the road test. Kansas State University researchers have completed a big study of 211 livestock video auctions analyzing the sale of more than 60,000 beef cattle and feeder cattle to determine the effect of trucking distance on the price of the cattle. The K-State team assessed media indicating the sale price of 42,043 beef calves, 19,680 feeders sold through Superior Livestock Auctions from 2010 to 2018, and then they analyzed the prices based on how far the successful buyer had to haul the lot after the sale. And the categories were within state, short haul, medium haul, and long haul. And not surprisingly, buyers who had a long way to travel to get cattle home paid less at the auction compared to those who had shorter trips home. And in addition to fuel costs, producers who transport cattle longer distance assume a higher risk of illness and subsequent loss in performance due to stress of the animal. The price difference, though, wasn't as wide as you might expect. For beef calves, in-state buyers paid an average of $1.69, And data included long-haul buyers paying $1.66. And those, of course, are in U.S. dollars. Well, the next regular cattle sale at the BC Livestock Co-op Kamloops Yards is March 23rd. Regular sales every Tuesday, of course. That's the way it's been for a long, long time. And there are a lot of special sales coming up now. You can find out all about them and see the sales live at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, our friends out there at the Innisfail Auction Market, of course, have regular cattle sales every Wednesday. Some special sales coming up in the next few weeks, including the Danes Cattle Bull and Female Sale on April the 18th. You can get all the information at InnisfailAuctionMarket.com, and you can find out more or book your cattle by giving Danny, Mark, or Dwayne a call, 1-800-710-3166. And now, the final item. I found an interesting parallel to the way our governments seem to be dealing with some of the challenges these days. Now, it starts out with the tribal wisdom of the Lakota First Nations that they passed on through generations. And that wisdom says when you discover you're riding a dead horse, the best strategy is to dismount. But here's the way it seems the government experts would deal with it. 1, buy a stronger whip. 2, change riders. 3, appoint a committee to study the dead horse. 4, lower the standards so dead horses can be included in aid programs. 5, reclassify the dead horse as living impaired. 6, harness several dead horses together to increase speed. And 7, promote the dead horse to a supervisory position. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up in the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, we'll look at sometimes how being too firm and assertive can result in resistance from your horse that can be pretty difficult to deal with. When the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. You know, sometimes you need to be pretty firm, but sometimes you gotta cut 'em a little slack. When a horse really doesn't want to go where you point him, well, that's coming right up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File. Right now, though, we've been getting a lot of calls about what's happening to the Spirit of the West cruise. Well, as you probably know, we were shot down for 2020. 2021, we had planned to do it this coming June. Well, we got that one shot down, but we don't give up easily. We're postponing what Billy and I are calling our farewell Spirit of the West cruise until 2022. We still expect to have everything we had planned for this year and last year in place, and Jim and Karen have said that if you'd like to come, well, your deposits will still be held until then. And we're still making plans and preparations for having all of the group start things off with a visit to our place and a live concert with the Western Spirit Band and special guest Lewis the Big Rig McIver, my kidney donor. So we'd like to thank all of you who were planning on joining us in 2020 and 2021, and hope that you can adjust your dates and join us in 2022. A 7-day return cruise leaving Vancouver with a pre-cruise stay at Sun Peaks Resort and a visit, of course, here at the ranch. And although this was going to be our farewell cruise, we will continue to promote what will be known as the Friends of the Spirit of the West cruises, and we'll have special hosts for those as well. Get the details as they're worked out, as always, from Jim and Karen. They can give you lots of information at 1-800-530-0131.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
At Urban Tack and Western Wear, they'd love to deliver everything to their customers on horseback, because after all, riding is their passion. Of course, that's not really possible, but I'll tell you what, you can order anything online and they'll deliver to your door in no time. By truck, that is. So wrangle up your Western Wear and more at urbans.ca and get this, free shipping on orders over $100. Some restrictions apply, or stop in today the good old-fashioned way. Exit 305 off Highway 2 by Crossfield. Canada's largest Western store. You know, sometimes insisting that your horse do what you think he can do in a situation where he thinks he can't do it will just make him resent you and build resistance in him. Now, let's say you've been riding at home almost every day, out on the trail, back to the arena, just you and your horse, or maybe another rider, and he's doing real well. And then you haul him to a big trail ride with a bunch of strange horses in a place he's never seen, and he becomes a different horse. You know, this happens a lot. The herd dynamic takes over and changes his mindset from being comfortable with you to being pretty stressed. You try to ride him away from the group and he really starts to resist, so you think you've done this before, you broke a horse or two. Just do it and lay your spurs and smack him with the reins and he might do it. But in this situation, a lot of horses will resist even more if they get upset and lose their confidence in you. If they get their security from another horse in the ride, and you're constantly forcing them to leave that horse, he'll love that horse even more and really get to resent you. So you got to find a way to make it as easy as you can for him, even if it means not forcing him past that scary object on the trail or away from the horses he wants to be with. Now keep in mind that this one ride is only a tiny period of his relationship with you. The resistance varies a lot with every horse, and sometimes it rises and falls as the day goes on. And a real horseman can sense where the horse's mind is at every moment. There might be times when he'll drop his head, soften, relax, and be right up with you. And a few minutes later, his head will elevate, and you can feel his stress level going up. You have to know when it's safe to push him past the resistance and when to short-circuit the resistance by getting him back into his comfort zone. The less stress and resistance you put in him, though, on the ride, the easier it is for him to trust you on future rides. And for urban saddles and western wear, that's the Horse Training File. Boy, our horses for their age are looking pretty darn good, and they get that daily feeding of Hoffman's horse ration. We think that's got a lot to do with it. You can find out what's in it and how it works at hoffmanshorseration.com. Dr. Bob Miller talks about some of his most interesting exotic patients, but first I think we got to pick the pace up just a little bit. Bren Hill writes some terrific stuff, and I guess a lot of us can identify with this one.
Chasing his tail from 9 to 5. He's gonna go to a rodeo on the weekend. Married a girl from town. She swore that she'd settle him down, but he's got a wild side and a desire to ride that don't end. And he's too much in the bottle, way too into cattle. He's really trying to be a father, but when he's 6 feet in the saddle, he's a modern day middle-aged cowboy. He's caught and dallied hard to his glory days, roping and riding while his whole life goes gliding by him. Better to burn out than fade away for the modern day middle-aged cowboy. She wants him to build a new house. He wants to buy some more cows and build a few new stalls on the barn for his new horses. She wants to travel someday. He wants to take her away to some old rodeo somewhere. They're on separate courses, and she's too much in his business, and he don't ever listen. She swears that she'll be gone by Christmas. He promises she'll miss him. He middle-aged cowboy. He's cotton dallied hard to his glory days, roping and riding while his whole life goes gliding by him. Better to burn out than fade away for the modern day middle-aged cowboy. He's just a modern day middle-aged cowboy.
Yeah, of course, that's Bran Hill, Good Hand from Utah. Well, Dr. Bob Miller's books, like his cartoons, are not just interesting, but they're entertaining as well.
Now, in your book, Most of My Patients Are Animals, is that?
Yeah.
Tell some wonderful stories, kind of. What are some of the most exotic, weirdest animals you've ever had to treat?
Well, I didn't know you'd read that book. You've read it, huh?
Well, I know a lot more about you probably than you do about me.
Obviously. That book was republished last year, and Amazon insisted on a change in title. Also, I took some stuff out because it's outdated and put some other stuff in. So the book was republished last year with the title, Yes, We Treat Aardvarks. And that's because in the Canal Valley where I located half a century ago, actually more than half a century, it was 54 years ago, the only industry outside of ranching, cattle and horse ranching, the only industry was the wild animal industry. And it was very extensive because the zoning in that county allowed anything. You could keep anything. And so the wild animal industry supplied the entertainment industry, movies and TV, with anything that was needed. Now, that industry still exists in my area, but it's no longer on Main Street in town. But so, for example, in the canyon in which I live, further up the canyon, there's 3 ranches that have wild animals that supply Hollywood. So the industry still exists there. But you almost can't name an animal that I haven't worked with, but one that is the one I put in the title, aardvarks. And that's because a lady had called me once and said, I understand that you treat any kind of animal. I said, yes, we treat everything, dolphins, whales, you name it. She said, do you treat aardvarks? I said, I never have, but we'd be willing to. I said, you have an aardvark? No, she said, but we're thinking of buying one. We want to be sure we can find a veterinarian. Well, I never heard from them again. So.
Yes, we treat aardvarks.
I worked on a lot of elephants.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, lots of them, yeah. But we had an elephant training center in Thousand Oaks. So I've worked on lots of elephants. Wow. And they're fascinating animals and very intelligent.
Now, Dr. Miller, it's great to sit here and visit, and I am really looking forward to being on the judging panel with you here at the Road to the Horse. At this point, the outcome is totally unknown, but I know it's going to be really, really fascinating, and all of these guys are tremendous top hands, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Well, after that great visit there at the Road to the Horse, Dr. Miller and his wife Debbie got together I think we went for supper with them, and they expressed a lot of interest in joining us on one of our cruises. But of course, with everything that's happened, that didn't come to be either. Well, still to come, a beautiful classic song of the West and a piece of cowboy poetry written by longtime working cowboy Terry Milliken, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Bob Wagner is well up in his 90s now, and he's doing pretty well, although he has some lingering effects from the injuries he got in a horse wreck a few years ago, and that slowed him down a bit. But his wonderful Western paintings still appear on Leanin' Tree greeting cards, album covers, galleries, and he, of course, was a pioneer in the science of one-man recording projects, playing all the instruments, singing all the parts, and doing all the mixing and engineering. And this one, for our classic Song of the West, was actually written by Ronnie Robbins, the talented son of the late Marty Robbins. Bob Wagner and Kin to the Wind.
Wherever the trail may wind, wherever the mountains climb, that's where you'll find me. I'm kin to the wind. Wherever the trail may go, wherever the tumbleweeds grow, that's where you'll find me. I'm kin to the wind. Nighttime may find me by a campfire bright, long before daylight. I'll be gone with the night. Wherever the river winds, wherever the mountains climb, that's where you'll find me. I'm kin to the wind. Nighttime may find me by a campfire bright, long before daylight. I'll be gone with the night. Wherever the river winds, wherever the mountains climb, that's where you'll find me. I'm kin to the wind.
Wow, how did he do all those vocal harmony parts on that last line? Bob Wagner. Terry Milliken rode for some of the biggest outfits in the West, and he's kind of a legend in the world of working cowboys. And I guess what a lot of folks don't know is that during those long cow camp nights, he's written a lot of really good poetry by lantern light. And with his permission, I'd like to share this one of his with you. This morning when I saddled up, it was 35 below. The wind was blowing from the north, horizontal snow. My fingers were so cold and numb as I brushed the snow from his back. My saddle pad was frozen stiff, and I throwed on my frozen cack. And when I pulled my front cinch, though it was too dark to see, I knew when I reached for the back one, he'd take a kick at me. As he stood there with a big old hump, these words came from my mouth: "If I'm still around next winter, I swear I'm heading south." And as I chased him round at the end of the halter shank to try and level out my saddle, I says to my partner Hank, "Why do we torture ourselves this way?" He says, "I don't know the reason. I didn't feel this way last summer. I guess it's just the season. I'm wearing everything but my bedroll, so getting my stirrup is tough because I can't even bend my knee or lean back near far enough. I finally jammed my pack in the stirrup, but now I can't reach the horn. That old pony still got a lump, and I cuss the day I was born. I do manage to jump and grab it and get my leg over the cantle. I ease him off in the blowing snow, and I feel like I'm riding a camel. He's grabby-assed and spooky, and I'm riding him pretty close. If I land on my back, I may not get up because I'm wearing too many clothes. It ain't too long I'm reminded I've neglected one little chore, but this sudden call of nature I'll just have to ignore. To get off is too much trouble, 'cause my horse ain't lined out yet, and 'cause I'm wearing all I own, bag on I might not get. The day is long and colder than hell, and I think I froze my nose. But we got some cattle heading home. A successful day, I suppose. Now you may wonder why I do it. Well, I'm trying to tell you why. It's gonna be spring in 2 or 3 months. New calves, green grass, and blue sky. Well, thank you so much for riding along with us today, and I sure hope you can be right here next week at the same time for more fascinating conversations, music, stories, and more. And thanks again to our great support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. If you enjoy this program, you'll love Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine. Subscribe online at cowboycountrymagazine.com. And thanks to all of you who have subscribed to our YouTube channel. That really helps. And the links to that and the podcast versions are available at our website, hugh-mclennan.com. Till next week, that's who I am, and hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.